Amanda LeeAnn Fletcher Hartleben was born on July 28, 1991 in Dare County, North Carolina, and went by her middle name LeeAnn. In 2020, 38-year-old LeeAnn was the mother of two, living in a cottage in Kitty Hawk, which is located in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Friends and family said she always had a smile on her face and enjoyed baking and gardening. In June of 2020, she met 28-year-old John Curtis Tolson, who went by Jay, at a party, and the two quickly became friends. Since he had been kicked out of his apartment and LeeAnn's kids were away at the time, she decided to let him stay with her for a couple of nights. However, the friendship quickly blossomed into a relationship and he continued staying with her. Unfortunately, this would be the biggest mistake of her life, and this seemingly innocent friendship turned romantic would be nothing short of a nightmare. LeeAnn soon learned that Jay was an abusive alcoholic who had become very possessive of her. As an example of his behavior, one time, a longtime neighbor friend of LeeAnn's came by with his dog to get his mail. When he entered the home, Jay became very aggressive toward him and his dog. To defuse the situation, the man decided not to engage with Jay and left instead. 5 weeks after meeting and letting him move in, LeeAnn had enough and kicked him out. On Monday, July 20th, 2020, she began packing all of his stuff in bags and set it out on the front porch. After 5 o'clock that day, friends and family would never hear from LeeAnn again. Strangely, 2 days later, Jay called 911 and said he found his friend, LeeAnn, unresponsive in the bathtub of her home.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
990 West Kitty Hawk Road.
What's your name?
Jay.
And what's the phone number that you're calling me from? And tell me exactly what's happened.
My friend, she's laying in the tub. She won't wake up. I think she fell last night. I'm not sure. There's blood coming out of her nose, so I can't get her to wake up.
Okay. Do you think she
Still
fell?
bleeding really heavily.
Do you think she fell?
Yeah, she had been drinking. She fell in the kitchen.
How old is she?
I think she's 38.
Okay.
She's breathing really loudly. I just can't get her to wake up.
Okay. Are you all right? And you said she is breathing?
Yeah.
He said before finding her in the tub that she had been drinking and fell in the kitchen. When first responders arrived, they found LeeAnn with no obvious signs of external trauma. She was airlifted to the hospital, but sadly passed away 3 days later on July 25th. Investigators initially believed she was indeed drunk and had fallen and hit her head, but an autopsy proved otherwise. It showed her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and there were no drugs or alcohol in her system. They also found defensive wounds on her forearms and the back of her hands. This shot Jay straight to the top of the suspect list. Why the officers came to their original conclusion is beyond me, because even her family could see blood covering the walls, doors, bed, and curtains in her bedroom. They also found a shirt saturated in blood shoved under the bed. Since her family felt that officers were dragging their feet, they hired a private investigator who went by LeeAnn's house and began videotaping. In the video, you can see blood stains on different items, including her mattress. Luminol was sprayed on different doors and walls in the home and also showed signs of blood. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the last call made by LeeAnn was on July 20th, 2 days before Jay called 911. His ex-girlfriend then came forward and said that Jay began calling her at 4 a.m. on July 22nd. When she called him back after 8 o'clock, he told her the situation and she instructed him to call 911. She would later tell the police that the story he gave her was different than what he told them. To top it all off, they discovered that Jay had searched on Google for topics such as how bad are concussions and what if someone won't wake up from a concussion. Jay didn't even visit LeeAnn once while she was in the ICU. 3 months after LeeAnn's death, Jay was arrested in Bangor, Maine, and charged with second-degree murder. It's believed he brutally attacked her 2 days before he called 911. In the end, Jay was given a sweetheart deal that included him pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to only 4 to 6 years in prison. I welcome everyone to vent their anger in the comments section. Bruce Johnson Jr. was born in Hobbs, New Mexico on September 25, 2010, to Mary and Bruce Sr. and went by the nickname Buddy. He was described as a gentle giant with a heart of gold who was very smart and funny. At some point, the family ended up in Kingston, Oklahoma. Unfortunately, his mother, Mary, suffered from mental health issues and began abusing Buddy and was said to be very violent at times. The small community of Kingston was also taking notice of Mary's strange behavior. This wasn't helped by the fact that she had stopped taking her medication in January of 2022. By March of 2022, her already worsening mental health spiraled out of control after a tornado struck the town. She began to have delusions that she was God and would call herself Mary Jesus. She was also telling her grandchildren they needed to assent, and the only way to do that was to die. This scared Mary's daughter, and on June 4th, she got her children a no-contact order. However, since a lot of the stuff Mary was saying was very vague, there was nothing the police could do. Her condition also wasn't severe enough for her to be involuntarily committed. For Bruce Sr., though, he felt she had reached a dangerous point and he needed to get his son away from her. So they packed up and moved back to Hobbs, New Mexico, leaving Mary behind. He then made plans to file for divorce. All of this devastated Mary because she wanted Buddy to live with her during the divorce process. However, Buddy was terrified of his mother. His father even found him sleeping with a baseball bat and asked him why, to which he responded, "That's for my protection from Mom." Before Bruce Sr. and Buddy moved back to Hobbs, Mary's own daughter and other family members reported the abuse, and police went to check out the situation. However, laws in Oklahoma prevented them from acting on the allegations. 40 days after they moved, Mary finally convinced Bruce Sr. to let her come see Buddy. Unfortunately, this would be the biggest mistake of his life. On July 9, 2022, at 10 a.m., Bruce Sr., Buddy, and Mary all went to bed. At 1 a.m., Bruce Sr. was awakened by his son screaming. When he rushed to his son's room, he found him lying on the bed with multiple stab wounds and a knife in his back. As he was heading to get his phone to call 911, he found Mary also stabbed and unconscious in another room. When police arrived, Buddy told them that his mother had stabbed him before stabbing herself in the chest. Sadly, he would not survive the injuries and was pronounced dead at the hospital a few hours later. Mary, on the other hand, was taken to Lubbock Hospital in critical condition but survived. During her time there, she allegedly told multiple nurses, "If I can't have him, no one can." 2 days later, on July 12, 2022, she was arrested and charged with her son's murder. In the end, Mary took a plea deal for second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years behind bars and was ordered to pay restitution for Buddy's funeral. Mary Agnes Klinsky was born in New Jersey on September 24, 1946. There are some discrepancies with her middle name. Some old newspapers and websites listed as Agnes, while others listed as Ann. While her gravestone only has an A on it, I believe Agnes is her actual middle name. When Mary was 3 years old, her mother sadly passed away, and then when she was 13, her father passed away. After that, her brother took over and helped raise her and her sisters. In 1965, 18-year-old Mary was a senior at Raritan Township High School and working as a student aide in the school library. She was excited about her future with her 20-year-old boyfriend, who was stationed overseas aboard the USS Mauna Loa and dreamed of becoming a beautician. They had plans to get engaged when he returned, but sadly, that would never happen. On the evening of September 15, 1965, Mary went to the Keensburg boardwalk to mail a letter to her boyfriend. At about 9 p.m., her sisters saw her sitting alone on a bench near the boardwalk. That was the last time they ever saw Mary alive. The next afternoon, a Garden State Parkway maintenance man found her naked body face down under a guardrail off the parkway's southbound entrance near Telegraph Hill Park. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death. Unfortunately, with no leads, the case would go unsolved for the next 50 years. In 2016, with advancements in DNA, they were able to link the murder to serial killer Robert Zirinsky, who plagued the state of New Jersey from the 1950s to the mid-1970s. In 1975, Zirinsky was sentenced to life imprisonment for the 1969 murder of 17-year-old Rosemary Calandriello. In 2001, he was tried for the murder of Rahway, New Jersey police officer Charles Bernowski, but was ultimately acquitted. In 2008, he was indicted for the 1968 murder of 13-year-old Jane DeRua. However, before the trial could even start, 68-year-old Zirinsky died of pulmonary fibrosis. He's also a suspect in the murders of 17-year-old Linda Balabino in 1969, 14-year-old Doreen Carlucci in 1974, and college student Ann Logan in 1973. Zirinsky himself claimed he had killed as many as 10 people. Zirinsky grew up on Bower Street in Linden, New Jersey. After inheriting the house from his mother, he began planting bushes and tall evergreen trees in order to conceal it, along with a 5-foot-high wall of stones that he never finished. The house was and is still creepy, and the neighborhood kids even claim the house that they called the Munsters house was haunted. Zirinsky's neighbors described him as a very strange person, and they warned all the children to stay away from him. They wouldn't even stop at the spooky house for trick-or-treating. When police raided the house, they hauled out boxes of evidence and several pieces of jewelry. Investigators now believe that one of the pieces of jewelry belonged to Ann Logan. Zirinsky's own sister, Judith Zapsa, described her brother as sadistic and said he repeatedly beat her. She was beaten so badly one time that she was out of school for 3 weeks. His mother, Veronica, adored him and defended his every action. Her answer to the beatings was for Zirinsky not to hit his sister in the face. Judith also said her brother was known for torturing animals. When he was 14 years old, he was committed to the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. In 1958, after being released, 17-year-old Zirinsky and his cousin Theodore Schiffer were in the middle of robbing a car dealership when Officer Bernowski interrupted and shot both men. Unfortunately, the wounds weren't fatal, and Zirinsky fired back at Bernowski, killing him. After the officer was dead, they fled the scene. The murder would go unsolved for years until 2001, when Judith testified against her brother at trial. Judith said that on the night of the officer's murder, one of her aunts brought the wounded men to the house, and she heard her brother say, and I quote, "He pissed me off, that's why I shot him," unquote. Zirinsky's mother, Veronica, then proceeded to remove the bullets from the men with a tongue depressor and a pair of tweezers. She said the family never spoke about the shooting after that night. After the shooting, Zirinsky finished high school and began taking all the money from the family grocery store and put his father on a $5 a week salary. 3 to 4 years before Mary's murder, he was charged with desecrating 1,500 tombstones in a Jewish cemetery in Linden, New Jersey, and for setting 5 lumber yards on fire. He claimed he was insane and didn't know right from wrong. For those crimes, he was institutionalized for 2 years in a maximum security psychiatric unit. After being released, he murdered Mary. If he were alive today, he would be charged with Mary's murder. Between 2011 and 2020, families in the city of Laurel, Maryland, and its 6 surrounding counties were plagued by a dozen fires that were intentionally set on their homes and cars. One of the families was strangely targeted 3 different times. The individual who set the fires was even caught on camera, but it would still take a few years before the man was eventually caught. When investigators finally caught up with the arsonist, they were shocked to find he was the former police chief of Laurel, David Crawford. Crawford had served as the Laurel police chief from 2006 to 2010. He and his wife Mary were known for being easily agitated and quick to form grudges. It was these grudges that led him to destroy the lives of so many people. He would target former colleagues that he felt slighted by, as well as 2 of his former chiropractors. Even his own family members were not safe from his revenge fires. In 2011, Crawford set his first fire in Prince George County. The act was caught on surveillance and showed him setting an unoccupied car on fire before accidentally setting his leg on fire. He then removed his jeans and put the fire out with his shoe. When investigators searched the area, they found a size 10 Nike sneaker, a Bic light, a wooden stick, and burned up jeans. His target for that fire was the then deputy city manager. In 2016, he targeted his stepson and his family 3 different times. 2 of the fires were set at their home, which also caught a neighboring townhouse on fire, causing more than $30,000 in damage. Before the fires were set, he had apparently had several heated arguments with his stepson. While a lot of the victims on his list recalled having disagreements with Crawford, some were confused and felt they had been on good terms with him. Other victims of his were an ex-police chief of Laurel, 3 ex-police officers he worked with, and an acquaintance of his wife's that she knew through a foster care organization. Thankfully, no one but Crawford was injured as a result of the fires. His own estranged daughter, Carrie Turner, said her father would hold a grudge over the littlest things. He also instructed her in grade school, and I quote, "If somebody hits you, you hit them harder."
I feel like finally it's now safe for me to speak out.
What was your reaction when you learned about your father's alleged criminal behavior?
So I was disappointed, but not surprised. But you know, it's still my dad, so there's varying emotions. If they thought my father was vindictive, which I said yes, and we do not condone these crimes in any way.
Crawford would research his victims, discover their addresses, and use Google Maps for directions to their homes. He would always show up at the victims' homes between 3 and 4 a.m. and put cryptic notes on his phone to remind him about the fires. In early 2021, 71-year-old Crawford was arrested and charged with 8 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree arson, and 1 count of first-degree malicious burning. After he was arrested, they found a burn scar on his leg. When investigators searched Crawford's home, they found he had a list of 11 intended targets on his phone titled Expedition Unknown. Next to some of the intended targets was a number that represented the number of times he had set fires at their homes or their cars. Investigators were also able to collect his Apple Watch data, which showed that he was active around 3 a.m. on the days the fires were set. In the end, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 8 life sentences that are set to run concurrently. Utahna Summer Halona Erickson was born in Provo, Utah on February 9, 1979, and went by Tana. Tana was known for her positive attitude and her love for her family and friends. In 2020, 41-year-old Tana was married to John Erickson and living in Midvale, Utah with her 2 young children. She was a stay-at-home mom who was very involved in her children's education. She would even volunteer to help teachers and staff with school events and projects. John, on the other hand, was a computer programmer. On October 28, 2020, just after 6 p.m., her 11-year-old son showed up at a neighbor's house asking for help and said that his father was trying to kill his mother. When officers arrived, they found the 7-year-old outside the house with blood on her face and clothes and severe cuts to her hands. When asked what happened, she said she heard her mother scream for help and ran into their bedroom, where she saw her father on top of Tana, cutting her with a knife. She then tried to get the knife and cut her hand in the process. When she was unsuccessful, she ran and got her brother. Her brother then also tried to get their father to stop by kicking and punching him, but it was of no use. When officers entered the bedroom, they found John on the bed with the murder weapon on his chest, bleeding from self-inflicted knife wounds to the neck and wrist. Next to the bed on the floor was Tana, dead from 3 deep lacerations to her neck and numerous defensive wounds. John survived his wounds and admitted to the murder. He said he was trying to take his own life when Tana interrupted him. He said it angered him, so he snapped and turned the knife on her. Once out of the hospital, he was charged with suspicion of first-degree murder and second-degree child abuse, as well as 2 counts of commission of domestic violence in the presence of a child. In the end, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 15 years to life. Sadly, the children still suffer nightmares from the horrible scene they witnessed.